Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of One Team TV. I'm Con Kakanis, a director at One Team IT. We're based in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne and provide IT infrastructure for primarily corporate clients. Thank you for joining us today. Our subject is to do with the IBM Power 10 developments for IBM Power systems. Those of you who've been around the power technology stack for a while know that we're at basically generation 10. And we're here not so much to talk about speeds and feeds today, but more about pragmatic outcomes that people can expect from the sorts of enhancements we're seeing. I'm very pleased to welcome two guests today. I've got Stephen Linsdell from IBM. Welcome, Stephen.
G'day, Con.
IBM Power specialist of long-standing and large repute. I've also got Dave Armstrong, who's the General Manager of Technology here at One Team IT. Dave is, I'm not sure whether David came from the dark side or has gone to the dark side, because he was a client of ours for about 15 years and coming up to a year soon, joined the team here and has been a great contributor. David's got a lot of power expertise as well. Myself was involved in power technology in Australia from day one when it was announced in '88. So we've all got fairly substantial background in the subject. Gentlemen, can I just ask you to introduce yourselves quickly? Stephen.
Sure, Con. So like yourself, I've been in the power world all the way through from 1988. So I've got a great deal of experience. I'm currently working as a pre-sales technical consultant, if you will, within IBM. I'm based in Melbourne and have very much a national role for looking after the IBMi customers in Australia and New Zealand, as well as general power announcements and making sure customers are informed about the latest news in the world of power.
That's great, Stephen. Thank you. And David?
David here from One Team IT. I've been with the business for approximately 12 months. Prior to that, my background's primarily financial services, banking, and fast-moving consumer goods, working on the other side of the fence as a consumer of technology, so managing infrastructure teams, technical services teams, service delivery, certainly IT operations, projects, and so forth. So been around the power platform pretty much my entire career, along with many other technologies, storage, cloud, Unix, Linux, you name it, but certainly power has been one that I've been exposed to throughout that period, and are continuing to do some really exciting work with a number of clients we're currently engaged with through One Team IT. Thanks, Con.
That's great, David. Thank you. So before we get into the meat of the discussion about Power 10, I've got a question to pose, which I'm going to pose for our two guests and also for anyone watching this, and we'll revisit this question at the end of the session. And the question is, what has IBM Power technology got in common with a Volkswagen Golf? Right? So that's your question to have a think about in the back of your head, you know, the little bit that churns away, solving problems. Well, and we'll come back and have a little chat about that at the end of the session. But I've caught my mates here by surprise, so that's good. So the first line of discussion for today is what's new about the Power 10 at a high level. So perhaps, Stephen, you're the subject matter expert for this discussion with respect to the evolution of the platform. If I could ask you maybe top two or three, key elements that you would see that the Power 10 announcements bring to consumers of power technology.
Sure, Con. Certainly the most obvious thing is the greater throughput, better performance that we get on the Power 10 systems now that they've got the new exciting Power 10 chips inside them. But coupled with that is sort of a dual goal that we want to ensure that the energy usage actually diminished. And so we've achieved that. So we're providing better performance with reduced energy consumption. So I think that is the main goal, really, of the Power 10 systems. Other goals include increased security, because that's such a critical factor for customers all over the world these days on any platform. And also the ability now to really embed AI applications into line of business applications on the Power 10 system, whereas in the past, customers using applications based on AI would probably push that workload off to a second system, do the maths over there, and then bring the answers back. with the Power 10 environment, now we can do all of that in the one LPAR, running the line of business and the artificial intelligence workload all together.
Okay.
They're the big three.
That's pretty cool. I think there's a fair amount to unpack in that little one to 2 minute summary. Let me start with, so higher performance but less power consumption. Generally, higher performance means more density, which means more heat. So are we defying the laws of physics? What's going on here, Stephen?
Hopefully we're not defying the laws of thermodynamics or whatever. A lot of people talk about the Simpsons episode, where there's an episode where Lisa invents a machine that defies the laws of thermodynamics. And even Homer says we don't allow that to happen in the Simpson household. But no, we've got some pretty clever folks back in the development labs. And so that with the Power 10 system that we've rolled out, which we'll talk a bit more about in a minute, but it is the high-end system. So the first Power 10 model we're announcing is the top of the line. And then into next year, we'll have the smaller and mid-range Power 10 models coming out. But this high-end one, if you compare its energy usage with the Power 9 predecessor, you can get the same workload done and use 33% less energy, or you could keep using the same amount of energy and get 50% more workload.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good story all up from that point of view.
That's great, Stephen. Can I ask David? I'll just come back to that point about embedding AI into line of business applications. I know from your past experience that those sorts of questions would be fairly contemporary and meaningful for the business. Have you got some insight on, from a client, user management perspective and executives looking at something like embedding AI into line of business applications?
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of it's you're driven from what you don't know, and I guess a lot of people are looking at AI, automation, other tooling around. Well, how do we do things better, faster? How do we actually do more with what we have? And I guess it's just the opportunity there that's very much at the infancy to determine, well, where does that fit into your business? And I know a lot of businesses are experimenting with it, getting various outcomes, and I think we're very early in the stage, and it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time. But if you're not looking at it, exploring it, I'd be very surprised. Most people are trying to think, well, how can we apply this technology to our business, and how do we integrate it with our systems as well? And this is what's exciting with, obviously, the power systems, is IBM are making that possible without having to sort of bolt on too many additional extras. So I think to be determined what value I think people get out of this technology from an AI perspective, but it's very exciting that it's at the forefront of what IBM's strategy.
Yeah, I think the pragmatic piece that we can talk about is what you alluded to, which is the integration of AI can happen within the same partition or platform without having to worry about layers of integration, security, connectivity, throughput on the network. So that Stephen, sounds to me like it's a fairly unique proposition in the marketplace.
I think that's a fair assumption. Certainly the trend has been to have purpose-built systems for specific AI purposes, and some sites may well have a whole room full of x86 servers, each one doing a different particular AI model inferencing work. In the IBM world, we've always tried to see our power systems as multifaceted, multi-talented, if you will, so that we should be able to run both traditional enterprise applications as well as the newer artificial intelligence type workloads. And we've added new capabilities into the Power 10 cores specifically to be able to do that mathematics that is required for AI tasks very efficiently and very quickly. So
Okay.
that's what's happening.
And when we're talking about integrating AI into line of business applications, are there any restrictions on the if you like, the line of business applications and the language platforms or anything like that?
No. I mean, you could be doing it in AIX or IBM I, as well as the more usual Linux environments.
Yep.
So some places, even in the past, could have had an IBM I or AIX running a line of business application, and then they'd pass some data across to a Linux LPAR that was doing some of that AI type workload. That's been possible even on Power 9. And you could do that on Power 10, but it'd be infinitely faster now with the new chipset in the Power 10.
Okay.
But what's, I think, is more groundbreaking is bringing that processing back into the same LPAR. So you've got an LPAR running, it's got memory, it's gone out, looked in the database, found all the appropriate customer master records and the details of loan applications, whatever, brought them into memory, and then it says artificial intelligence core processing unit, go and look at this data. It's already here for you. Go ahead and process it. So that's incredibly efficient compared to saying, I've got all this data. Oh, now I've got to send it all across the network or across some sort of virtual network, at least, to another system that's then going to have to read it all in and do some work with it. So that's where the efficiency gain is.
Oh, fair enough. So I take David's comment that, this is all fairly early days for people. And what we're seeing is, more like proof of concepts or test environments and that sort of stuff for AI. So it actually sounds like this announcement anticipates a time when this will be like a taken for granted core production reality, that you'll have AI integrated with your line of business apps within the same platform and with all of those benefits.
I think that's a fair comment.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll come back to the more traditional announcement benefit of, it's more throughput, it's faster, it's less power, and all that sort of stuff. Like, we've all been around, this is not our first rodeo, as they say. We've seen vendors of all stripes make announcements and make promises. Can I just revisit for the benefit of clients that may be newer to the platform? We're now at the 10th generation of this platform, Power 10. So we've seen transitions from, Power 1 to Power 2 or Power 5 to Power 6 or Power 7 to Power 8. Maybe David, you've been through this a few times. How did you find when you had your client hat on that the promises were kept in terms of, what the value proposition was for the new generation? Say when you went to, I don't know, say Power 7 from previous gen. As a client, how did you perceive the integrity with which the promises were kept in terms of this is going to give you this benefit, and that benefit? What was your real life experience in that respect?
Yeah, look, Con, I guess, there's an expectation you're going to be updating to newer technology. You're going to get more capacity. You're going to be able to do more with less. That's a given, and that's definitely been delivered through the actual various generations of power technology. No question about that. What's been more exciting from my experience is being able to do things faster. So, and what that means for your business. So when you think about moving from one technology or even jumping a couple of generations, so moving, say, from Power 7 to Power 10 or Power 8 to Power 10, for example, the speed that the transaction can complete in is so much quicker. And what does that mean for your organization is really what gets me excited. So, if you're a traditional batch processing, you've got, day end or month end periodic processing type routines that run. Well, what does it mean if they're going to run in half the time to your business? If you're an online real-time digital workload, what does it mean if that API call is going to complete 30% quicker or 50% quicker? That's really exciting stuff. Talking about AI, talking about the demand for data and externalizing data. If you can do that quicker, if you can extract, transform, load your data warehouse in half the time, what does that mean from a reporting perspective at the end of the month or at the first day of the month? That's
Mm.
the stuff that's really moved the needle for the organizations that I've worked with when we've done the upgrades. It's been great that we've got the extra capacity and we can do more with what we have. We've saved some money potentially on maintenance. We've saved some money on software. But what's really been the needle mover has been able to do things faster. And that can also mask some bad practices, right? It can mask some issues within, your software or your processes. But again, that's not such a bad thing, because it allows people then to focus on new work rather than those old problems. So, to me, really, what's been the differentiator is being able to do things quicker versus having additional capacity, right? So, that's the best way I could sum up. And as far as delivering on those at each iteration, I've definitely been more than, I guess, satisfied with how much faster every generation of the power system technology has been. And I don't think people talk about that enough. I think it's overlooked. Everyone thinks, we've got to upgrade for various reasons. It could be, end of life. It could be for maintenance. It could be for saving money. People just not thinking about, well, what does it actually mean for my business if I can do things faster? To me, capacity and quicker, they're two different things, right? So that's where the real value is and has been.
Okay, so the quicker, that's a really good point you make, and we might just explore that a bit further. What you're basically saying is that it's one thing to have a process that runs faster in isolation, but in today's world, where a platform like a power platform might have 20 or 50 or 100 or 200 integration points to other systems or other functionalities, what you're talking about is the business being able to change its operational modus operandi. For example, like opening hours might be something simple as that, or SLAs on turning around commitments to customers, delivery times, patient record processing, like real world practical outcomes that a business is looking to promise to its customers. When you say 30% faster, well, we all know technology gets faster with every generation. What we're talking about here is that translates into business processes that can be re-engineered or dramatically improved, as you say, to move the needle for the business or its customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's definitely underestimated and overlooked in a lot of upgrade business cases and so forth. People are more driven by, well, we need capacity, or we need to prepare for growth. There's transformation coming. Or they may be in some refresh cycle or whatnot.
Yeah.
But you really need to think about, well, how will this technology change the way this organization can work, because we can do things so much faster.
Yeah, I suppose it's hard to capture in a business case, because you're writing a business case from an IT perspective. You're not going to be able to speak for marketing or warehousing or manufacturing or customer service or contracts or anybody else. Stephen, have you got any insights onto what David's talking about how businesses can harness the performance increase to change the way their business works?
Yeah, one of the things I generally think about in this relationship is the batch jobs at night, and then in contrast or comparison with the backups that are being run. We all know, I think we all know, that backups should be done. And it always comes down to a question of how many hours do we have available to do the backup, regardless of operating system or ERP package. And sometimes customers find that the end of day jobs that are run for so long that the backups tend to be, by necessity, rather piecemeal, because there's just not enough hours to do a full, complete backup every time. Then in the event of some sort of disaster, it can be a little bit piecemeal restoring a recovery process, because there was a bit of the data backed up on the Tuesday, a bit on the Monday, a bit on the last weekend, and maybe the operating system hadn't been backed up for 3 months or something like that. Whereas if you've got a faster environment that's getting through those end-of-day batch jobs more speedily, then all of a sudden maybe you've freed up an hour and a half, 2 hours or something that you've never had available to you before. And therefore you can really look at, oh, I could really make use of that to do a better job of backing up my system, or indeed to do something else at night that I just haven't had enough hours available to do it. One other case that admittedly wasn't just one technology generation change, it was a fairly massive power technology generation change, that there was one customer who did jump quite a few generations of technology, and in the past had been in the habit of submitting a batch job to run just before lunch, and then they'd go off to lunch and come back, and maybe it had finished, but probably hadn't. After they did the technology change, they didn't get out to the front door before the job had finished. And so in a way that was kind of disquieting for them, because they had to change the whole lunching regime, because this work, which was supposed to spread over the lunch, no longer even ran as far as the start of lunch. So, that was a sort of productivity boost for the company, if not for the people having lunch.
Yeah, I remember a situation with a similar generational change, and the new environment ran the job basically instantly instead of 45 minutes, and people thought it hadn't run. Yeah. So they just kept submitting it, and it would run like, again, 1 or 2 seconds instead of 45 minutes. So that's an interesting point that you make, David, that a business case generally doesn't capture what the downstream benefit is to business operations. That's something that probably something for all of us to think about next time we're talking about a business case for an enhanced system environment. So Stephen, I'm going to touch on Linux now, and sort of seek both your views on a couple of points to do with Linux. Now, we know that the Power platform is a fantastic Linux host, and with IBM acquiring Red Hat in the probably close to 2 years now, is it, Stephen?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
There's some more sort of tighter integration there as well, and I know that probably the most substantial gains that the Power platform's making in the market is in hosting Linux workloads. But there is this thing in the marketplace that the Power system it's a big box and it's expensive and all that sort of stuff. But we know that you can get a Linux host for $20,000 or thereabouts in Australia. So Stephen, have you got any insights into how you're seeing Power being used for Linux workloads, both at the lower end of the scale, or at the upper end of the market?
It's certainly most compelling at the higher end of the marketplace. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The Power 10 chip will be able to support 4 times the number of OpenShift transactions. That's the Linux platform for running Kubernetes transactions, than an x86 latest generation chip will. So you say, am I going to have a room full of x86 servers and racks of them, or will I have 1 or 2 drawers of Power 10 in a rack, and that will be about equivalent in performance, 4 times the throughput. So it certainly makes a lot of sense in that environment to have that just sheer capacity under a very small footprint. There was another customer that we know of that, this is a couple of years back, but again, it's the same sort of thing. Cutting back on real estate can be very beneficial. Some customers have got very tight machine room environments, and they literally don't have room for racks of x86 servers. And if there's a sufficient workload that will require lots of throughput, then if you can get more throughput through fewer cores in fewer drawers in a rack, then the Power system certainly shines in that regard. And one thing I was just thinking of, we probably should advertise that for 20 years, IBM has had a Linux development lab in Canberra, and it's still going strong. And so they've been working hard on some of the enhancements in the Power 10 Linux support and security aspects of the Linux world. So it's not just overseas somewhere, it's very much an Australian Linux Power relationship that we've got here.
Okay, that's That's good to know, and I've always categorised IBM marketing as one of the world's best keepers of secrets. So that falls into the same category,
Yeah.
as does the fact that at the end of the day, when we work as a business with customers running all sorts of technologies, and I think one of the best or strongest promises that IBM has kept with Power is that the cost of ownership for a given workload is ridiculously beneficial to an organisation and generally beats the pants off other platforms. I know, David, you've run lots of different technologies in your operational days on the client side. What's your take on that? What I'm saying, am I full of it, or is that something that you can actually say? Well, that's a fair proposition. What would you say?
Look, it's an interesting discussion because IBM and certainly Power Systems have been playing in the virtualization space probably longer than anybody, and but not so much recognised as being in that space, particularly the Power Systems. And what's exciting is IBM continued to evolve that technology. You look at the latest generation, and to Stephen's point, that you can scale it out or you can scale it up. There's so much flexibility in the way that you can consume the resources. You can slice and dice it to a very granular level. So they're really, from a capability point of view, when you look at public cloud offerings and you compare it to a power system, you can absolutely build your own private cloud or even a public cloud if you want on a power system. They're incredibly flexible in that respect. And with respect to Linux, obviously that's the operating system of choice that digital workloads are running on these days. And with the Red Hat, obviously with the Red Hat investment, there's enormous capability to automate and build your own private cloud on the back of a power system equivalent to the public cloud offerings, using the same technologies as well. They're not identical. There is some skilling required around the power systems infrastructure and hypervisor level, but a lot of the similar tooling, whether it be the actual automation as code and so forth, runs across those platforms. So what we see and what I think the hybrid is very much a real thing. Big organizations are absolutely leveraging both public and private cloud, and power systems is going to play a big part in that going forward. So, and obviously Linux, I think Linux will dominate. There's no question. Transaction processing, online processing, digital processing in the data center. It already is. Yeah. Exciting times, and I think it's around how do you fit your organization's infrastructure, and how do you build a flexible and adaptable infrastructure across private and public clouds. And Power System plays a great big part in that. Look,
I think the other thing that probably gets lost as well is people talk about a platform, but as Stephen pointed out too before, you can have a Power environment that's running Linux, and it can be running line of business applications on I or AIX that have been around for many years. And a lot of our clients have got substantial investments, and it's not the work of a moment to move off one application or one line of business system to another. So coexistence with what's already been invested in, plus a new technologies like Linux-based solutions on the same platform with the integration benefits that we've spoken about, generally underestimated, because a lot of these decisions are made in silos in businesses, unfortunately. All right, so gentlemen, we're sort of coming towards a conclusion. I'm going to come back now to my little trick question from before. So, Stephen, I might ask you first. What's a Volkswagen Golf and IBM Power System? It's not a riddle. What's a Volkswagen Golf and a power system got in common?
Assuming it was something positive, I suppose I'd be thinking all pervasive, international, used all over the world. And in fact, was manufactured all over the world, as power systems have been. And so I'd like to think of the power system being the people's system, like the VW was the people's car.
That's pretty good. Dave, what do you reckon?
Yeah, look, I was thinking, I've actually drawn a blank, but what was I thinking now about the VW? Oh, look, not to be underestimated. So, you see plenty of Golfs, but you probably don't want to line up against them on a red traffic light waiting for it to turn green, right? Because some of them are pretty fast off the mark. So what comes to me is don't underestimate them.
That's pretty good for a guy who drives a turbo diesel Hilux. So the reason the question came up is I was reading a paper the other day, and I still read physical papers, and there was an ad for the new Golf, which is now the Mark 8. And I remember as a teenager, the Mark 1 Golf was announced in 1974, I think, in Australia. So the Golf's been through Mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the Mark 8 has just been announced. That's spanning a time from 1974 to 2021. Now, funnily enough, in no road tests or reports do I ever see anybody talking about the Mark 8 Golf being a legacy system or a legacy vehicle, right? And its technology is up to date. There'll be a hybrid version soon. It's got everything is in terms of integration, performance, emissions, environmental footprint. It's just taken for granted because it's the new Golf. It's fantastic. And I look at this and I think, well, how many parallels are we've got Power 10, which has gone from Power 1 in 1988 or System 38 before that. Let's just say Power 1 or the as they were in 88 through to Power 10 that was announced in 2021 for delivery in 21 and 22. And it's just very, very interesting to me that people can look at the Golf and say, wow, that's the absolute duck's nuts. That's the latest and greatest. And all of us and those in the power community and even power customers have to deal with the perception that the Power 9 or the Power 10 is an old system. So it's just a thought that I would just leave you guys and leave the audience with. Appreciate your time today and all of your thoughts and inputs. For the audience, we did talk about AI today, and we've got another episode coming up shortly, which is about AI specifically on the power environment. So we hope you can join us for that one as well. In the meantime, please reach out. You can see our details there. We're on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out, if you want to follow us, follow One Team IT or IBM Power, or connect with any of us to continue the conversation, we very much appreciate it. One Team IT, we're specialists. There's not many in Australia, but we are one of the primary specialists on IBM Power technology in Australia. We help our clients with their management of that technology and support, and we also run infrastructure as a service, leveraging power technology for clients who don't want to run their own assets. They can run their workloads on our assets. So there are ways we can help you if you're in that power stack. And we hope you got some benefit from today's session. And I'd like to thank once again David and Stephen for joining us. And I hope that as an audience you've got some from today's session. Thank you very much.